shit. Hey, so now we're gonna look at a couple of adaptations. This might be the last video. In herbivores and carnivores. On the spectrum, herbivores, you guys all know that herbivores are animals that eat only like vegetables and grass. Vegetarians. Or are they vegans? I don't know. One of those things. And carnivores. When we talk about carnivores, we are actually not talking about human beings. We're omnivores. We're talking about truly carnivores, like the wolf, the lion, the tiger, those guys. Um, in terms of teeth, if you look at the back of your teeth, if you feel it, you have these molars that are more grindy kind of thing. They're kind of flat. It's usually in the back of your the back of your teeth, the premolars and the molars. They're more for grinding rather than tearing. So carnivores have more of those incisors, that the little Dracula teeth that you all have, like we all have. I have those too. So those are incisors. They're used for tearing. Not a lot of tearing required for animals that eat leaves and grass. More of chewing. Remember, plants have this cellulose cell wall that needs to be broken down. So that's what. So they have a difference in teeth. The carnivores have more of extended stomach. So on one spectrum is the carnivorous stomach, which is larger and more extended because their diet is primarily proteins, and we know that proteins are digested only in the stomach. And then on the other end, herbivores, they have more of a compartmentalized stomach, and we'll talk about that in a second. But what they have larger or longer of is their small intestine. Their small intestine is much longer because cellulose is digested in the small intestine by a symbiotic bacteria. There's E. coli, there's Campylobacter, there's Staphylococcus, Campylobacter, E. coli, and different variations of those, that live there. And they break down cellulose by using cellulase. In the middle, between the two extremes, in the middle is the omnivores, where our stomach is kind of longer, our soles are small intestine. It's kind of an adaptation of both carnivores and omnivores. The other thing they also have is purely carnivorous animals don't have as much bacteria in their gut as herbivores have, for the simple reason that they don't need it. There's no breaking down of cellulose. There's no breaking down of other plant protein, other plant materials. There's no breaking down of lignin or amylose, amylopectin, any of that stuff, because they're purely carnivorous animals. They do have certain amount of bacteria. Some of the E. coli is still present because they have a symbiotic relationship to producing vitamin K, which is required for blood clotting. Whereas herbivores have a large amount of bacteria in their gut. Carnivores also have a shorter alimentary canal because since their food is primarily meat, it has to be like pooped out as quickly as possible. You don't want it to sit in the stomach. It's like, it goes bad really fast. It becomes, there's gases and all of these things happen. So you want it out as soon as possible. Whereas in the case of, what are those things called? Herbivores, it's much longer. The process of digestion itself takes much longer. So this is a sample of the gut of a carnivore versus an omnivore. You can also see that the cecum, like I think we talked about it in the past, cecum is much smaller in the carnivore, whereas the cecum is much larger in the omnivore. In the herbivores. I talked about it in the previous segment where we talked about what the cecum does. So there is a difference in the size. You will also, one of the other very interesting things is, remember when we talked about the esophagus and how the esophagus has a cardiac sphincter to make sure that stomach acids don't pump right back into the esophagus, causing heartburn, indigestion, and all that one. No, not indigestion, heartburn. In the case of herbivores, it is actually a two-way valve. I mean, I don't know, when you were in like grade school, you learned about chewing the cud. So, I think, okay, there you go. They have most herbivores have like four-chambered stomach. One of the reasons for that is to allow the food to kind of sit here at leisure and then go back into the mouth so they can chew again. So it's called chewing the cud. So the food goes in one direction, kind of goes in there, mixes up, becomes almost like a bolus, and then it can go right back and then they can chew. So when you see a cow or even horses do this, when they're sitting and they're at leisure, they kind of bring the food back. It's called the cud. They bring the food right back and chew it, masticate it better. So there's more mechanical digestion happening. The other thing also to remember, so that's the cows. The other thing you have to remember when it comes to enzymes, herbivores have a lot of salivary amylase in their mouth, so their saliva is alkaline, just like ours, like 7.4, 7.8. Whereas carnivores, on the other hand, they don't have salivary amylase, so they don't have a very alkaline saliva because they don't have salivary amylase. They don't do any digestion in their mouth, so there doesn't need to be salivary amylase. I mean, you probably heard that, oh, your dog's mouth has less bacteria than a human mouth. Yes, that is true because their mouth is more acidic, so, bacteria tends to die. It doesn't mean that alkaline does not kill bacteria. They do too, but acid is better. So the last part of this is going to be looking at the nervous system. Nothing in the body actually functions just by, it's not, gosh, I keep forgetting. Nothing in the body actually functions without the brain. So everything is kind of directed by the brain. So we're going to look at hormones. We're going to look at the endocrine system, which produces hormones. There are two different types of hormones. One is an endocrine hormone, and the other one is an exocrine hormone. Exocrine. Let me write it down. It's the same thing, just the word exo. Exocrine. So instead of this word, it would be this. X. In the digestive system, we're going to first look at exocrine. Exocrine just means that the hormones are secreted into the location where it needs to act upon receptors. An endocrine system means the hormones are pumped into the bloodstream and then it finds its receptors. For example, a hormone like epinephrine is pumped into the bloodstream. But when we talk about gastrin, which is the next few ones we're going to be talking about, they kind of go to the location where they're supposed to go to. Hormones have two different types of functions. One is stimulatory and the other one is inhibitory. As the word suggests, stimulates, it allows something to happen. Inhibits, it stops something from happening. Okay, so let's look at the different hormones that we're going to look at. Gastrin is the first one we're going to look at. Gastrin is produced by the lumen of the stomach, and then it actually kind of binds itself to the parietal cell receptors and sends a signal to produce hydrochloric acid so that pepsinogen can be activated and you can get pepsin. Then the next one is CCK. Actually, let's skip that. Let's go to secretin. Secretin is produced within the pancreas as well as the insides of the, it's produced within the It's produced within the inside of the duodenum and the small intestine. Its job is to actually, as soon as the chyme starts coming in, it sends a signal to the acer cells in the pancreas asking it to pump bicarbonates. Now the next one is CCK. CCK actually, what it does is it recognizes that the chyme has a whole bunch of different small peptides and fats in it that needs to be digested. So it sends a signal to the gallbladder to release the bile. It also sends a signal to the pancreas to start releasing trypsin, chymotrypsin, and dipeptidases. So to recap, gastrin, gastric juices, It's within the stomach, parietal cells. CCK is recognizes the fats and proteins in the chyme and then sends a signal for bile and sends a signal for the pancreatic enzymes. Secretin realizes that chyme is coming in and it's very acidic, so it needs to be neutralized. So it sends a signal to the pancreas to secrete bicarbonates. So most of the glucose, when it comes into the bloodstream, it's taken up by cells and then it is converted into ATP and it's used up. But if you have a lot more glucose molecules than the body can use, it's actually stored in the liver, as well as first in the liver and then in the muscle cells in the form of glycogen. Glycogen is pretty much an analog to starch, so it's like potato. It's like your body doing the same thing that potato does, but starch is a long chain of glucose, whereas glycogen is like this branch chain. When you go into a starvation, a different hormone comes in and breaks it down. If there is more than what glycogen can store, then it goes ahead and stores itself in adipose tissue. So like when people have like Atkins diet or low carb diet, basically what they're doing is they're motivating their body to break down the glycogen and convert it into glucose, use that up first, then go into the adipose tissue, break down the fat and convert you, because fat molecules are made up of essentially C, H, and O. So you can break it down and rearrange it, make it into a glucose molecule and use it. It's very energy intensive, so you tend to lose weight. So two of the most important hormones within the digestive system for homeostasis of glucose is insulin and glucagon. Insulin and glucagon are secreted by the Langerhans, the islets of Langerhans in the pancreas. Interesting story to find out that they killed a whole bunch of dogs. Awful. So they would do a pancreectomy on dogs, and they would like cut out the whole of the pancreas, leaving just the islets of Langerhans. Obviously, a physician by the name Langerhans, and they would see what hormones are being produced, and they figured out it was insulin. Interestingly, if you had type 1 diabetes, which means your body is not producing insulin, in the Nazi camps they didn't put you to death because they were experimenting on you. It's not interesting, it's kind of sad, but it is an interesting tidbit. Now, usually what happens is once insulin is pumped into this bloodstream, it is an endocrine hormone. It's pumped directly into the bloodstream. It kind of locks itself. It stimulates the receptors for glucose molecules on all your other cells. And those molecules are kind of the channels open up and glucose goes in, and then you make ATP. If there is excess, what it does is it triggers the synthesis of glycogen. This happens in the liver. So there's it's a two-step process. One is to tell the cells to start taking up glucose so that they can produce ATP. The second, if there is excess of it, is to send a signal to the liver to start the glycogen making process. Glucagon is the opposite of insulin. So when there is when you have low blood sugar, basically glucagon is triggered and it tells the body to start breaking down glycogen. Remember, glycogen is a long molecule of glucose. Break it down and produce glucose. So then insulin comes. So then the blood. So then the glucose in the glucose level in the blood goes up, insulin is pumped in, it goes to the cells, tells the cells to start taking up the glucose molecules, and ATP is produced. It's pretty simple. This is a good picture. What I'm going to do is I'm going to kind of stop with this and then we'll go into the other section. The last section of this is how the brain functions, which is going to be a really short video. So it kind of is pretty self-explanatory. Homeostasis, this is how much you should have. For every 100 ml of blood, you should have about 70 to 110 milligrams of glucose. If you have any more than that, that's really, really bad. So, I mean, it's bad, but you can control it.